The galaxy was burning. Far beyond Earth, in a distant star system, a peaceful world was dying. The planet Elyra once shined like a jewel in space. Its cities were tall and bright. Its people were known for wisdom, art, and science. They believed in peace. They believed in unity. But peace did not save them. Dark shapes filled the sky above Elyra. Massive warships blocked the stars. Their metal hulls were black and sharp. Their engines glowed red like fire. They belonged to the Vrax Dominion. The Vrax did not negotiate. The Vrax did not forgive. The Vrax only conquered. Elyra's defense fleet was almost gone. Broken ships drifted in orbit. Fire burned across the surface of the planet. Emergency sirens echoed through the cities. Inside the main command center, the Elyrian leaders stood in silence. The room was damaged. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Large holographic screens showed the battle in space. Every few seconds, another Elyrian ship disappeared from the display. High Commander Terrell stood at the center of the room. His uniform was torn. His eyes were tired. He had led his people for 30 years. Now he was watching them lose everything. "Our outer defense line has fallen," an officer said quietly. "And the second line?" Terrell asked. "Gone." The word felt heavy in the air. On the main screen, the Vrax fleet moved closer to the planet. Hundreds of ships. Perfect formation. No fear. "They are preparing ground invasion," another officer reported. Terrell closed his eyes for a moment. For centuries, the Illyrians believed they were safe. They were part of a galactic alliance. Many strong civilizations stood together. But when the Vrax attacked, that alliance fell apart. Some worlds were already destroyed. Some were hiding. Some were too afraid to help. Now Elyra stood alone. "Casualties?" Terrell asked. The answer came softly. "Too many." Silence filled the room again. Then a young communications officer stepped forward. Her hands were shaking. "There is one option left." Everyone turned toward her. Terrell looked at her carefully. "Speak." She swallowed. "We can send a long-range distress signal. To Earth." The room reacted instantly. "Humans," one general said with disbelief. "They are new to the galaxy," another said. "They lack experience." "They are emotional," someone added. "Unstable." For many years, the Illyrians had watched humanity from a distance. Humans were different. They argued among themselves. They fought their own wars. They were not united like older civilizations. They were seen as unpredictable. Weak. Commander Terrell walked slowly toward the large window that overlooked the burning city below. He had studied humanity. He had read their history in secret. He knew something others did not. "Yes," he said quietly. "Send it to Earth." The generals stared at him. "Commander," one protested, "they may ignore us." "Maybe," Terrell replied. "But humans have something rare." "And what is that?" the general asked. Terrell looked back at the battlefield in space. "They do not abandon those who ask for help." The room fell silent again. Another Illyrian ship exploded on the screen. Time was running out. Terrell gave the final order. "Prepare the signal." The communications team worked quickly. Power was redirected from failing systems. Emergency transmitters activated. A message was recorded. The signal carried one simple request. "We are under attack. We ask for aid. Any aid." It was sent across the stars. Farther than any signal Elyra had ever transmitted. Then they waited. Hours passed. The Vrax fleet entered low orbit. Enemy landing ships began descending toward the surface. The Illyrian shields were collapsing. Still no response from Earth, the communications officer said softly. Terrell stood still, watching the sky burn. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe humanity would not come. Maybe this was the end. Suddenly, the communication console made a sharp sound. The young officer froze. I am receiving something. Everyone rushed toward her station. The signal was weak. Short. Direct. It came from Earth. She played the message. A human voice filled the broken command room. Calm. Clear. Strong. Only 5 words. Hold your line. We are coming. The room went silent. Outside, enemy ships continued to fall toward the planet. The Vrax believed victory was certain. But far away, in another part of the galaxy, something had begun to move. And the war was no longer one-sided. The skies above Elyra were no longer blue. They were red. Fire burned across the upper atmosphere as Vrax landing ships broke through the clouds. Large metal carriers moved slowly toward the surface, guarded by attack fighters. On the ground, cities were shaking. Civilians ran through broken streets. Emergency transports lifted children and elders toward underground shelters. Elyra's remaining defense cannons fired into the sky, but their power was fading. Inside the command center, High Commander Terrell stood very still. The human message echoed again in his mind. Hold your line. We are coming. But when? The Vrax were already here. Enemy ground forces have landed in Sector 7, an officer reported. Sector 9 shields have collapsed. Our orbital defense grid is down. Each update felt like another wound. The communications officer kept scanning space. No new signals from Earth, she said quietly. Above the planet, the Vrax flagship moved into position. It was enormous. Its surface was covered with weapon towers and heavy armor. It looked like a floating fortress. A transmission came from the Vrax commander. His face appeared on the main screen. Cold eyes. No emotion. Elyra, he said, his voice deep and heavy. Your resistance is pointless. Surrender, and some of you may survive. Terrell stepped forward. We will not surrender. The Vrax commander tilted his head slightly. Then you will be erased. The transmission ended. Seconds later, heavy orbital cannons fired. Bright red beams struck Elyra's final defense ships. Explosions filled space. The last ships protecting the planet were destroyed. Now there was nothing left between the Vrax fleet and Elyra. Inside the command center, fear spread quietly. One officer whispered, the humans are too far away. Another said, they cannot arrive in time. Terrell did not answer. He watched the star map carefully. Then, the sensors began to glitch. A strange reading appeared at the edge of the system. Commander, the sensor officer said slowly, confused. I am detecting multiple warp signatures. How many? Terrell asked. The officer zoomed in. His eyes widened. Not dozens. The room held its breath. Hundreds. Before anyone could react, space itself seemed to tear open. Blue-white flashes exploded across the darkness. 1. 10. 50. Then hundreds more. Massive human warships exited warp in perfect formation. They were larger than Illyrian cruisers. Their hulls were dark gray steel, covered in glowing blue lines. Heavy weapon systems rotated into position. Engines burned with bright blue light. The human fleet formed a wide defensive wall between the Vrax armada and Elyra. Silence filled space for one long second. The Vrax ships paused. They did not expect this. A new transmission came through. This time, it was human. On the main screen appeared a man in a dark uniform. His face was calm. His eyes sharp. "This is Admiral Marcus Hale of the United Earth Fleet," he said clearly. His voice was steady. "No fear. We received your distress call." Behind him, human officers moved quickly across their bridge. Terrell stepped closer to the screen. "You came," he said quietly. Admiral Hale nodded once. "We said we would." Then the Admiral opened a public channel to the Vrax fleet. "You are attacking a civilian world," Hale said firmly. "Withdraw immediately." The Vrax flagship responded. "You are young, human," the Vrax commander said. "You do not understand the power you face." Hale's expression did not change. "We understand enough." The Vrax ships began charging their weapons. Red energy gathered along their hulls. The human fleet did not move. They held position. Every ship aligned perfectly. "Human fleet," Hale ordered calmly, "prepare defensive formation." Blue energy shields activated across the human ships. The glow spread like a wall of light. The Vrax fired first. A storm of red plasma and heavy missiles rushed toward the human line. Inside the Elyrian command center, everyone watched in silence. The first wave struck. Bright explosions filled space. For a moment, it looked like the human fleet disappeared inside fire. When the smoke cleared, the human ships were still there. Shields glowing. Holding. Then Admiral Hale gave a simple command. "Return fire." The human fleet answered. A wave of blue-white energy cannons fired across the darkness. Precise. Controlled. Deadly. The first Vrax destroyer was cut in half. Then another. The battle for Elyra had truly begun. And for the first time since the invasion started, the Vrax were no longer advancing. They were defending. Inside the Illyrian command center, hope slowly returned. Humanity had arrived. But this was only the beginning. The Vrax Dominion was powerful. And they were not finished yet. The battle above Elyra was no longer one-sided. It was chaos. Blue and red beams crossed the darkness. Missiles chased targets like angry comets. Broken ships drifted between fleets. Fire lit the cold space like small dying stars. The Vrax were confused. They had studied many races. They knew how others fought. Most species protected their strongest ships. They retreated when damaged. They calculated survival. Humans were different. A Vrax cruiser fired a heavy plasma blast at a human destroyer. The blast hit directly. The human ship's shield shattered. Hull plates broke apart. Flames escaped into space. Any other fleet would have pulled back. The human destroyer moved forward. Its engines burned brighter. It ran directly into the Vrax cruiser. Both ships exploded. Inside the Illyrian command center, silence filled the room. They sacrificed themselves," one officer whispered. Commander Terrell watched carefully. "No," he said quietly. "They chose." Across the battlefield, human ships shifted positions constantly. When one was damaged, two others moved to cover it. Smaller human fighters flew dangerously close to enemy cannons, drawing fire away from larger ships. They fought like a pack. Not as individuals. The Vrax commander stared at his tactical display. "Why do they not retreat?" one Vrax officer asked. The commander did not answer. Another human transmission suddenly appeared on an open channel. It was not planned. It was from a damaged human ship. A young human pilot, blood on his forehead, breathing hard. "To any Illyrian forces still active," he said, voice shaking but strong, "evacuate your northern cities. We're pushing the enemy line back." Behind him, alarms screamed. His ship was dying. But he stayed at his controls. He guided his burning fighter straight into a Vrax missile carrier. The explosion was massive. The missile carrier was destroyed. On Elyra's surface, thousands of civilians escaped because of that single action. Commander Terrell felt something unfamiliar. Not just hope. Respect. The Vrax began adjusting their tactics. They formed tighter formations. They focused fire on the human command ships. Admiral Hale stood on his bridge, calm but serious. Enemy targeting command vessels, an officer reported. Expected, Hale replied. Casualty report. High. Hale nodded once. Maintain formation. Another wave of Vrax ships entered the system. Reinforcements. Their numbers were still greater than humanity's. Inside the Vrax flagship, the commander made a decision. Deploy gravity snares. Strange devices launched into space. They activated between the fleets. Suddenly, human ships began slowing down. Space itself seemed heavy around them. Admiral, a human officer said quickly, they are distorting local gravity fields. Our maneuverability is dropping. The Vrax fired a concentrated attack. Several human cruisers were hit hard. One exploded. Another lost engines. The Illyrians watched in fear. Was this the turning point? But something strange happened again. Instead of panicking, human ships began broadcasting open signals. Short messages. Simple words. Hold steady. Cover your left. We're with you. No fear in their voices. Just focus. Then Admiral Hale gave a new command. All ships, execute pattern Delta. Human vessels suddenly split apart in small groups. Instead of fighting the gravity field directly, they used it. They allowed themselves to be pulled slightly, then redirected momentum. Like stones skipping across water. They began targeting the gravity devices first. Small fighter wings dove straight toward the strange Vrax machines. Many were destroyed before reaching them. But enough got through. One by one, the gravity snares exploded. Human ships regained full movement. The Vrax line began to break. For the first time, the Vrax commander felt something dangerous. Uncertainty. He opened a secure channel to his officers. These humans, he said slowly, they fight as if defeat is not an option. Another officer responded, they are protecting a world that is not theirs. The commander looked at the burning battlefield. Then perhaps, he said coldly, that is their weakness. He gave a final order. Prepare the Annihilator. Deep within the Vrax flagship, a massive weapon system began to power up. Energy gathered. Dark. Heavy. Deadly. Above Elyra, human ships were pushing the enemy back. They did not see what was coming. But the Vrax had decided. If they could not win the battle normally, they would erase the planet completely. And humanity would have to choose. Retreat. Or die with Elyra. Deep inside the Vrax flagship, the Annihilator awakened. It was not just a weapon. It was extinction. Massive energy rings began spinning around the front of the ship. Dark red light gathered at its center. Space around it started to bend and shake. On the human flagship, alarms screamed. Admiral, a sensor officer shouted. Enemy superweapon charging. Hale stepped forward. Target? The answer came quickly. Elyra. On the main screen, the Vrax flagship pulled slightly back from the battle line. Smaller Vrax ships formed a protective wall around it. The Annihilator continued to charge. Energy levels rising. Fast. How long? Hale asked. 3 minutes until full discharge. 3 minutes. That was not enough time to destroy the flagship. Not enough time to evacuate the planet. Inside Elyra's command center, Commander Terrell saw it too. The massive weapon pointed directly at his world. "Can your fleet stop it?" one Elyrian officer asked quietly. Terrell did not answer. He knew the truth. Even human shields could not survive that blast. The Vrax commander opened a channel. His cold face appeared again. "Human fleet," he said calmly, "withdraw immediately. This world will fall. Do not waste your ships." Admiral Hale stared at him. "If we withdraw," Hale asked, "will you spare the civilians?" The Vrax commander did not hesitate. "No." The channel closed. Silence filled the human bridge. Every officer understood. This was the moment. Retreat and save the fleet. Or stay, and lose everything. One young officer spoke softly. "Admiral, if that weapon fires at full power, our forward line will be destroyed." Hale looked at the hologram of Elyra. Cities burning. Civilian transport still trying to escape. He gave his order. "All ships." His voice was calm. "Form shield wall." Across the battlefield, human ships immediately changed formation. They stopped attacking. They stopped advancing. Instead, they moved as one. They placed themselves directly between the Vrax flagship and Elyra. Layer after layer. Cruisers in front. Carriers behind. Destroyers filling the gaps. A solid wall of steel and blue light. Inside many ships, human captains understood what this meant. Some sent short messages home. Some said nothing. But none left formation. Back on Elyra, Commander Terrell watched in shock. "They are shielding us." "Yes," the communications officer whispered. The Annihilator reached full charge. The Vrax commander gave the final command. "Fire." The beam erupted. It was not just light. It was like a piece of a star. A massive red column tore across space and slammed into the human shield wall. The first line of ships absorbed the impact. Their shields flared bright white. Then shattered. 3 cruisers exploded instantly. The beam continued. The second line held for 2 seconds longer. Then they broke. Metal burned. Engines detonated. Human ships vanished in fire. Inside the flagship, the bridge shook violently. Shields at 60%. 40. 20. Hale held onto the command rail but did not move. "Maintain formation," he said. The beam continued to pour into them. More ships died. But the beam weakened. Human shields overlapped. Each layer absorbed part of the blast. Finally, the Annihilator faded. Silence returned to space. Smoke and debris floated everywhere. Half of the human front line was gone. Destroyed. The shield wall was broken. But Elyra was still there. The planet lived. On the surface, millions of civilians stared at the sky in disbelief. They were alive. Inside the Vrax flagship, alarms rang. The Annihilator was drained. It would take hours to recharge. The Vrax commander stared at the battlefield. The humans had not moved. Even now, the surviving ships were reforming the wall. Damaged. Burning. But steady. He whispered something rare for his kind. They chose death. On the human flagship, casualty numbers filled the screen. Thousands lost. Hale looked at them silently. Then a new signal appeared on sensors. Large. Very large. "Admiral," an officer said slowly, "new warp signatures detected." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Identify." The sensor display zoomed out. Then further. Then further. Dozens. Hundreds. Thousands. Warp flashes ignited across the edge of the system. More human fleets. More than the Vrax had ever seen. Earth had not sent part of its military. It had sent everything. Reinforcements filled the darkness behind Hale's fleet like an endless ocean of steel. The Vrax ships hesitated. For the first time since their invasion began. They were outnumbered. Hale opened a wide broadcast channel. His voice was no longer calm. It was strong. Cold. You were given a chance to leave, he said. You chose extinction. Human weapons began charging across thousands of ships. Blue light replaced the red glow of the Vrax fleet. The final battle was about to begin. And this time, humanity was not defending. Humanity was advancing. Space above Elyra was silent for one long second. Then it exploded. Thousands of human warships moved forward together. Not fast. Not wild. Controlled. Like a storm that knew exactly where to strike. The Vrax fleet tried to regroup. Orders were shouted across their channels. Ships shifted positions. Defensive lines formed again. But something had changed. Before, the Vrax were confident. Now, they were reacting. Human ships advanced in layered waves. The first line fired heavy cannons. The second line targeted engines and weapons. The third line protected damaged allies. It was not chaos. It was strategy. The Vrax launched everything they had left. Plasma storms filled space. Missile swarms chased human cruisers. Smaller Vrax ships tried to break through and reach Elyra. They failed. Every gap closed quickly. Every weakness covered. On the human flagship, Admiral Hale watched calmly. Focus fire on their command ship, he ordered. Human targeting systems locked onto the massive Vrax flagship, the same ship that had fired the Annihilator. Blue energy gathered across dozens of human dreadnoughts. The Vrax commander saw it too late. Divert all power to shields, he commanded. But human weapons fired together. A single, massive wave of energy crossed the battlefield. It struck the Vrax flagship directly. The shields flared red. Cracked. Then shattered. The second wave followed instantly. The front half of the Vrax flagship exploded in bright fire. Shockwaves rippled across nearby ships. The third wave hit the exposed core. The Vrax flagship broke apart. Slowly at first. Then violently. The largest ship in their fleet turned into burning debris. Across the Vrax channels, panic spread. Their command was gone. Their strongest weapon destroyed. Human ships did not stop. They pushed forward. Precise strikes. Clean destruction. Within minutes, the Vrax formation collapsed. Some ships tried to flee. Human interceptors chased them down. Others powered down weapons and drifted helplessly. For the first time in their long history, the Vrax Dominion retreated. The remaining ships jumped to warp and disappeared into darkness. Silence returned to space above Elyra. Broken metal floated everywhere. Human ships, damaged but standing, held position. On Elyra's surface, people slowly came out of shelters. They looked up at the sky. The enemy was gone. Inside the Illyrian command center, no one spoke for several seconds. Then the communications officer said softly, "The Vrax fleet is in full retreat." A quiet sound filled the room. It was not cheering. It was relief. Commander Terrell requested a direct channel to Admiral Hale. The human admiral appeared on screen. His uniform was damaged. Smoke drifted behind him. His face looked tired. But steady. "You saved us," Terrell said. Hale shook his head slightly. "You called for help," he replied. "We answered." Terrell lowered his head in respect. "Many of your ships were lost." "Yes," Hale said quietly. There was a short silence. Why? Terrell finally asked. Elyra is not your world. Hale looked at the burning planet behind Terrell. Then he gave a simple answer. Because no one should stand alone. Over the next weeks, human ships did not leave. They helped rebuild orbital stations. They sent medical teams to the surface. They shared food, supplies, and engineers. They did not demand payment. They did not ask for control. They only helped. Other civilizations watched closely. They had doubted humanity. They had called them emotional. Unstable. Young. Now they saw something else. They saw courage. They saw loyalty. They saw a species that would cross the galaxy for strangers. Months later, in a gathering of galactic leaders, Commander Terrell spoke clearly. When we begged the stars for help, only one voice answered. He paused. That voice was humanity. From that day forward, things changed. The Vrax never returned to Elyra. And whenever a human ship entered a new system, it was no longer viewed with doubt. It was viewed with respect. Because across the galaxy, one truth became clear. If you cried out into the darkness, humanity would answer.